Theology. Oh, thank you very much. So we're really honoured to have Haddon come and share with us as one of the founders of Child Theology movement. And Haddon was at the last meeting and made a suggestion of something that had been on his heart and mind, and he'll talk out of his own passion in a moment of where he was reflecting around Child Theology and MAGA, a silence of a watchman. I hope I've got that right, of the different emphasis there, Haddon. And so it's really important that we kind of take a step back and take a step into what's happening around our world. And we're really excited to have Haddon to come and share with us. So thank you very much. As we said, we are recording. So Haddon will share for about half an hour. We'll about have half an hour for discussion before we do any updates. And as somebody helpfully pointed out earlier, if you need to take your comfort break, then please just come off camera. We won't be breaking, so we'll just leave that to individuals. So Haddon, thank you very, very much. We'll just hand over to you to say anything else that you'd like to say in introducing yourself, and really look forward to what you have to share with us. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to open up a discussion rather than to develop my own position. Although that will probably come out, but really, I hope everybody will engage with a question that troubles me. Without Matthew 18, where Jesus placed a child amongst the disciples, I would never, I think, have got into anything like child theology. And that still, for me, is the key text. And in Matthew 18, you remember the disciples, who were essentially first century egocentric MAGA men, argue amongst themselves about who is greatest. And when we wrote Entry Point, we didn't realize how significant and how problematic the word great is. But a couple of years after we published it, along comes Donald Trump, and now the whole world knows that the word great is very problematic, because what it stirs up and what it represents in the life of people is enormous and questionable. And the story of Jesus, in which he puts a child in the midst whom the disciples would never have thought was great at all, and says, this is what you've got to receive, this is what you've got to become if you're going to enter the kingdom of God, actually sets up a very clear alternative difference, clash between the kingdom of God and the whole MAGA culture. And it's a culture and ethos, as well as a kind of political movement. And I'm very wary I'm not interfering in American politics, although it's interfering with mine. And I don't want this discussion to become a discussion of America today, and most of us are not directly involved. But you see, I think that what I call the MAGA culture, or the MAGA ethos, is something that spreads around and is present in this country in different ways, under different names. And the basic clash on the one hand, the ambition to be great, and to be great in the sense of making something like America great. Or you remember the song Rule Britannia? It's the same spirit. Something about the relation between that and the way of Jesus. And you see, the interesting thing about MAGA at the moment in America is, I think, that Trump gets prayed for at his inauguration as though he's surrounded by bishops of an established church who are endorsing him before God. And then the staggering thing to me is that he, like Saul appearing amongst the prophets, suddenly Trump appears amongst the theologians in Holy Week, pronouncing on us, telling us the meaning of Holy Week and how to observe it. And, you know, it's this blending covers up this clash between Jesus and his presentation of greatness in a child and what's going on now. I think that a problem with the word great, is that it's very vague. It strives for definition. It's eager for definition, and it sparks speculation, ambition of one sort or another. But it's worse than that. Greatness, as you can see from the story in Matthew 18, necessarily inspires and stimulates competition. You can't be sure. If you think you're great, you can't really be sure. You've got to be greater than him. And actually, you want to be greatest because you think you might be secure then. But as Shakespeare said, uneasy lies the head that bears the crown. You can get to the top and you're still insecure. But it's a dreadful drive to competition. And of course, competition means putting other people down. It means despising them. And when some despise others, they provoke a lot of resentment. And so you get conflict. And the upshot of this quest to be the greatest, which the disciples had, the upshot of this quest is that you block the possibility and the road of love. You can't love your neighbor when you're trying to be the greatest or greater. And if you block love, you undermine collegiality and of any kind, community, and you poison mission. Because mission involves going out and inviting people, welcoming them. And indeed, as we've argued in Entry Point, about page 165, I think, the mission that Jesus sent his disciples out on was not that the missionaries, were to invite others into the kingdom. They were to throw themselves on the invitation and hospitality of those to whom they went. In other words, the coming of the poor missionary actually gives people the chance of being hospitable and welcoming and making community, and puts them on the spot about this, so that the growth in community in mission comes from those who receives the missionaries, not so much what the missionaries make. All this, I think, is bound up with or springs from this fundamental ambition and anxiety about greatness and being great. And of course, the significance, let me say this first, the significance of Jesus is that his greatness, and he had a greatness, the communion with the Father in which he lived, doing the Father's will. He's a man going on his way to give his life for many. He is the meek and lowly one. And the picture of Jesus in Philippians chapter 2 is one who might well have thought of greatness, his greatness, as equality with God, but he didn't rely on that. He made himself nothing and became a servant, a human, and gave himself to death. And the picture from the gospel that I like, that really represents the way Jesus lived in the world, not as a struggling for greatness, but really found a different way of living in this world that is made by the struggle for greatness, was that encounter with when the people said to him, "Don't go to Jerusalem because Herod wants to kill you." And Jesus said, "Go tell that fox." I do like that. I mean, that's a very sharp way of replying to a murderous ruler. Go tell that fox, but it's not a menace. It's just a characterization, isn't it? Got him straight. Go tell that fox, today and tomorrow, I'm going to get on with the work that's been given to me. And the third day, I will go to Jerusalem and be killed. Jesus simply went on his way doing good in the crowd. That's the greatness of Jesus. It's not a greatness that is essentially competitive, of putting people down. It's a greatness of getting on with what God has given you to do. Now, there's no denying, of course, that the temptation to be great, the temptation of greatness is enormous, and it presses on us all the time in different ways. Even Jesus was subject to it. You remember his temptation in the wilderness, and the being that I like to call the naga came to Jesus and said, "Hey, look, you're the Son of God. You're hungry. Make these stones bread." It's a temptation. God is on your side. God will look after you, whatever happens. Throw yourself down. And people will think it's a wonder. And if you're really going to be great, I can give you real greatness. All the kingdoms of the earth I can give to you. And Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." I'm not going that road. But the temptation, you see, I think it is something that somewhere in Entry Point we did make something of, and it's certainly very important to me. The proneness of Jesus to the vulnerability of Jesus to temptation. And of course, I remember in Entry Point, it is pointing out that Jesus was subject to temptation from his own disciples. When Peter said to him, "No, don't go that way," when he was going to the cross. So there's a radical difference and clash, an incompatibility between what Jesus is teaching about greatness and what the world gives us again and again. I'm rather ashamed that we never, in Entry Point, as far as I can make out, we never actually quoted the text from Mark 10, which is where the two disciples had been squabbling about who would sit on Jesus' right hand and on his left when they came into the kingdom. And Jesus said to them, the princes, the great ones of this world, the Trumps and the Putins and the like, they want the top places. They struggle for this sort of thing. But it won't be like that for you. Whoever wants to be greatest must be least. And whoever is going to be great must be the servant of all. And we didn't make enough in entry point. Certainly we didn't make enough, I think, of the ambiguity of the Greek pais and paidion for child, the fact that it's also used for servant. And we, of course, are so properly modern and tender-minded that we don't believe in child labor anymore, and that's absolutely right. But all the same, the power of the image of the child, when it's linked up with Jesus saying, the greatest is the servant of all. And this is a great challenge, of course, to the whole MAGA culture. And now I come to the second point that I want to make, which is a matter for discussion. One of the things that pains me most about the MAGA culture is the way so many Christians have fallen for it, and even in this country, and we are insulated, blessedly insulated in some respects from this, but you find this MAGA Christians, they won't own up to it because it's still not the right thing to do in many circles in this country, but we shouldn't think that it's not creeping. But that Christians should fall for this is really extraordinary. And when, Jesus has done what he's done, not simply in his own life, but actually in the way he presents us with the child, and we just ignore all that. And this is what has provoked me to ask this second question, which is the reason why Ezekiel 33 comes into the title. You remember there, he says, if the watchman doesn't give warning of something wrong, there will be he will be responsible. He will be failing. He will be failing God. He will be failing the people. The watchman must speak up when he sees things. And if the watchman is blind or asleep or insensitive, and if the watchman sees MAGA going and doesn't think, they use the word great, make America great again. Don't let's bother about America here. Just focus on the word great. Make something great. We could be saying, make me great again, or make me great for the first time. But it's the word great. And Jesus comes along and says, that's not what great means. That's not the way to any kind of decent greatness. And if we know that that's the case, why are we so susceptible or so silent in the face of the MAGA culture? Why has there not been a whisper from Child Theology? Now, I'm aware, of course, that the sort of thing that means something for me, which is expressed in entry point, is not everybody's style of child theology. You can do child theology quite respectably without ever getting into this kind of territory. But if you go back, if you really pay any respect to Jesus and the gospel, then you can't avoid it. And then the question is, what do we do about it? Why hasn't child theology as it were, said, this is something we ought to speak to. We ought to raise our watchman's voice. We ought to, but, well, we're not political, are we? We actually care for children, practically. We care for families and such like. And around the edges of the care for children, there's a lot of politics, but that's pretty hopeless, or that's pretty difficult, or that's not our business, or we don't know how to think about it theologically, so we don't do it. And so I don't know what it is, but the thing is that I've only recently thought of this. It's taken a long time maybe for the great Donald Trump to get through to me and really impress me that this is something I ought to take a view on. But I don't think that child theology generally, we haven't. And we don't have to think of the question I want to leave with you, and I'm going to stop now because I'm wittering on. That does child theology need to do some work and think of doing some work on the political realization and the political implications of its own work, of its own faith, of its witness? And I'm not asking, I don't think you want to have a child party or get engaged in politics at that kind of level. Politics is much more fundamental than that. When Jesus put a child amongst the disciples and he insisted that you've got to receive this child, you've got to receive this child because you receive me, it goes together. He was doing a political act. He was forming a community. He was making a peaceful, constructive community between strangers, between these men who didn't want to take note of a child in their midst and think this is one of us. That is a basic political act, forming community. But you don't form community if some of you want to be the greatest and don't want to receive the others. There's something, seems to me, something that we ought to think about. I've got a lot more here, but I've spoken quite long enough, too long. And you have got the wisdom to work something out.
You're fine on time, Haddon, for half an hour, but you're welcome to stop and then just speak a bit later on. That'd be fine. So
I have stopped. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. That's fine. Haddon, thank you. That is so stimulating and insightful. And I think by you sticking your head up above the parapet, you've begun to answer your own concern. And for that, we're grateful, because there are risks in doing that. And so we're really grateful for you being not just pointing at the problem, but actually doing something about the issue that you've raised. So thank you very much. So let's open it up for discussion, comments, questions. I'll just, please feel free, because the way my screen is open at the moment, I can't see everybody. So please feel free for yourself or members of the CTM directors just to prompt me or introduce people in, and just see whether anybody wants to answer that question or come back and pick up of any of the 2 points that Haddon's mentioned about the greatest and Christians falling for it, and the questions of what our response can or should be. Thank you. Okay, Carolyn, thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to pick up on Marcia's point about your insights into greatness, and just wondered if you could expand a bit on what you think Jesus was seeing in the child that he put in the midst that was the opposite of the greatness agenda.
Really good question. Thank you.
Well, I think that I think he chose the child because, in his view and in the eyes of God, as it were, that a child is infinitely important, as we say. But he chose the child because in the social view of the disciples, in the culture of the age, and to some extent the culture of ours, it was obvious to everybody without thinking that if you're talking about greatness, you don't put a child there. You don't consider a child is not a runner in the race. I think we quote Rowan Williams in Entry Point, so that he really was giving an enormous shock, and it wasn't simply a no, you're wrong. It was saying there is a quite another way of understanding or pursuing greatness, which you haven't thought of, because you start the search for greatness halfway up the ladder. And the truth is, you've got to come right down to the beginning and to the lowest point and begin from there and work it out that way. But of course, the great thing about the child is that it's not simply the child. Becoming like a child is not simply coming down. You actually come to the living root of things, the beginning of life. I mean, all that can open up from a child. But the child hasn't got all that yet. The child, in some sense, never will. I don't know what do others think.
Great, thank you.
Could I just say something? It's fascinating that Haddon's talking about a book, and obviously the two of us are involved in it together. It seems to me that it's not about what Jesus saw in the child, if that was your question, Carolyn, or in a child, but the fact of a child or whatever. And the one thing he points out, that's Jesus, is humility. So become humble like a child. And what that means is we have a chapter on humility, not that the child is, if you know Dickens, a very humble child, a very humble man, or something like that. But just that, as Rowan Williams also said, the disciples would never have considered the child in their trading game. Now, I think in the context of MAGA, the notion of a deal or a trading game, look, if you're into this greatness and hierarchies, then you're not even aware of. It's below, the child is below the radar screen. It's right down. And so it is the word humility. And I think Philippians 2 indicates, I mean, it's a wonderful link with how Jesus likewise was deliberately, as Paul describes it, making himself of no reputation. I mean, just in Welsh, neb, no one, a nobody. So just as happened in church history for 2,000 years, the big men and the theologians and so on have largely overlooked child. And we will allow Augustine with Confessions for at least a page or two with his nurse and so on, but otherwise not. Just one thing, a point of a fact, Paul, so if you can't see people on the screen, we have people from Fuller. I'm not sure they know that there was a Lutheran in the form of Marcia here at the beginning, and we've been discussing MAGA, and decided we wouldn't get into, as I understand it, talking about America particularly, but we're very aware that what's happened is that greatness has now been thrust on everyone's agenda. Haddon referred to Trump's inauguration as if surrounded by bishops. And the bishops seem to be people in the trading game. I mean, they seem to be the ones closest, seem to be the big people. But there we are. Just, if I might say something I see as a challenge about greatness, and forgive me if you've heard others say this before, but there seems to be an attraction, maybe unconscious, among churches about greatness. So if churches have a worship session, so called, as a sociologist, I've taken time to listen to what's said. And basically the greatness and the bigness and the awesome majesty of God is something we insist on telling him for 15 to 20 minutes. And children were taught our God is a great big God, higher than a high skyscraper, deeper than a submarine, as if that was something that should be, that was it. And as a minister of the gospel, I find that when I'm trying to be faithful and selecting hymns and songs which do justice to what Jesus was doing in becoming humble and was acting out in this, I find that apart from Graham Kendrick, meekness and majesty, and the servant king, this is our God. He calls us now to follow him. I find a dearth of resources that describe God in Christ, in his humility. So I want to say that's across the board. That's the way it seems to me. And I think we need to recognize, quite apart from MAGA, there is something still about size and greatness that is stuck in the system.
Yeah, can I respond to that? I've got some personal experience.
Please do, Leslie. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. So I couldn't find the hands up button, sorry. So long time ago, decades ago, I found myself elected onto the General Synod of the Church of England. And the very first session, standing in the outer corridors of Westminster Abbey, waiting to go in for the Queen to open things and the inauguration to begin. And there were about 20 of us from our diocese behind a choir boy holding a sort of a placard thing saying Chichester Diocese. And I found myself right behind him, right at the front of the group. And I thought, oh, I've got this wrong. I'm the newest, youngest person here. And so I wriggled my way back down those 20 people and found myself standing next to the bishop. Because the Church of England, in its quaint little way, has tried to present to the world that we think the great come on first, and that's the child, the choir boy, followed by the next people, on and on and on, and the bishop's at the back. But of course, as always, the world has taken hold of that and turned it on its head. And it's the other way now. The also rans come on first, and the big prize winners come on last. So how can we find ways to teach ourselves and our children to show to the world that we're putting ourselves last, not at all, not neb, but last, and putting other people first? And that means the youngest, the weakest, the smallest, the child. How can we act that out and live it out in society so that it's visible and not misunderstood?
Great, thank you, Leslie. I think that's a really important point, building on what we've been sharing and discussing. Thank you. Anybody else like to comment or ask a question, add to the flow of discussion? We're still in very good time.
Hadn't look, sorry, just Paul, because it's something I meant to say. Bonhoeffer, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, is one who is attractive. Anniversaries come and so on, but I still find that part of his core theological message about God being weak in the world and allowing himself to be edged out is something that still is not taken into our hearts. I mean, into the bloodstream of life in the church. So I just want to say that, because child theology is not alone in discovering something of the depths of humility and the marginalization of Jesus and the willingness of God in Christ to be there, to be that low.
Yeah, no, thank you, Keith. It's good to put it in a wider theological context and historical context as well, especially with regards to discussing greatness and the context of that and the neighbour brothers as well. Yeah, great. Caroline.
I think I've forgotten his name, but the God as Child writer did explore that a bit, the sort of the weakness of that. I haven't read it yet, but Sally, I think you've read it, haven't you?
Yes, a while back, along with Ryan Stoller's Liberation and Child Theology. I could go and grab it, but both he does talk quite a bit about that. I'm not sure I fully agree with everything that he says on the perspective, but it's a really interesting take on understanding God as child. Yeah, it's certainly worth an exploration and a read. And I think Graham will be interested in joining one of our webinars, to dialogue a little bit about it.
Could between the two of you put the book and author in the chat if folks are not familiar with it? That would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I'll be in trouble now asking my wife to move from a very comfy sofa with her feet up. It will cost me later. Yeah. Carolyn, was there anything else that you wanted to come back to on that? Oh, okay, she's just typing that up. I think Carolyn has started to type, Sally. So
okay,
yeah, you might want to just check it. Great. Well, we're still in good time, but perhaps. Oh, I was just about to ask if Haddon wanted something, but he's obviously being asked to see whether he might like something else at the moment. So, is there anything else anybody would like to comment on? I don't think we should ask Haddon anything at the moment. Anybody want to make any comments or feedback? Again, it's not a matter of all agreeing with each other. It's a matter of a kindly, robust conversation together. So,
Paul, just as a way of trying to see whether Dave Scott and friends from Fuller might be something they want to share, or even David Connick.
Yeah.
Just inviting them, look, to say, please do share. I think just something that Haddon said about Jesus being tempted is here something really significant, because this is just meaning that this isn't others we're talking about. It's not as though someone in America or somewhere else has a problem with greatness. it is something about the very nature of things. And so that's something Haddon said. I think we say something about it. But we do have a chapter in the book on the temptation of Jesus. And we can say trite things like he was tempted in every way, such as we are, yet without sin. But I think the notion, for me, I find it hard to understand the way Jesus responded to Peter without thinking Peter's got him on a raw nerve here. So Jesus says to Peter, "Follow me." Peter does. And then comes the point where Jesus says, "Look, what's going to happen to me? The Son of Man is going to be," and this disclosure. And Peter says no. He rebukes Jesus. And Jesus responds, "Get behind me, Satan." This is in the context of a description in the gospel where there have been the temptations. And there's something about that response, which is, look, this isn't just let's spot a fly here, or this is no problem. It's as though, Peter, please understand, this is very, very close to the whole challenge of mission and who I am and the Father's will. That's what I want to say. So I just want to say the temptations carry on right through. And just before Matthew 18, we have Peter with another in my view, very serious temptation, because the possibility of not going to the cross for any who've entered into this must have been remarkably attractive. That's it.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Keith. Well, as Keith said, please feel free. Anybody who's not shared would
Scott has got his hand up.
I do. I very much do. We've been talking here in the room. Hi, everybody. Dave Scott, Fuller Seminary. I've got two students here, Kara Pfeiffer and William Moeyu. I'm intrigued by the conversation about greatness, and I think we're always caught in that space between, is it good to desire to be great, or is the issue that we have a poor definition of what greatness is, and we need to do a better job of listening to our Savior as far as what greatness really ought to be all about. And I think, as an American, I think that is the fundamental thing that we have completely lost. There's so many Christians, ostensibly, in this country that don't seem to have a biblical sense of what greatness is to be. I'm intrigued, Haddon, by your comments too about competition and how that plays into it. I want to think some more on the role of competition in the Christian life, because I think that's something that is worth studying a little bit further. And certainly most children have a sense of what it means to engage in competition through sports, through all kinds of games and activities. I think there's more to think about competition in itself, but definitely in a competition to be greatest in following God, in being part of the kingdom. That is a really fascinating question. My colleagues here have a couple of comments too. I don't know, Kara, did you want to share?
Yeah, no, please do. Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Hi, everyone. My name is William Moeyu. I'm so thankful for this discussion, and I just wanted to kind of just pose a question, not really a question, maybe a comment. But I'm asking myself, okay, what's the way forward after this discussion? What's the way forward after this discussion? Would it be helpful for us here as Child Theology Movement, as scholars, to maybe make a statement or publish something about what we're discussing here, maybe based on our view of greatness and, the biblical view of greatness, and how we feel like this has been, taken off with the whole idea of MAGA in this country. So I thought maybe we could do something about that. Just not this discussion, not just to end here, but just we make it out there for other people also to hear what we are talking about, and just I think it will be such a witness if we can do something like that. So thank you so much.
No, that's a great question, and probably a really good idea. I think Haddon, that was really at the heart of Haddon's final of his question to us, of in the theological reflection, what, so what, now what process. There's got to be that. Dave, was there somebody else there who wanted to comment in your group? I can't remember whether you said there was both people.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Kara here. Thinking back to Leslie's comments, I remember reading in the Didascalium Apostolorum, I believe it was there, that in a meeting, if a poor person comes in off the street and there's no seat, it was the bishop who was supposed to get up out of his seat and give that poor person their spot. And I think that is the kind of teaching that we need to have, and we need to think about a lot in our communities. And I remember I grew up as a pastor's kid, and I remember my parents, in one simple way that they did this was whenever there'd be a church dinner following the service or something with the community, they would always say, "We're the pastors, we eat last." And as a child growing up in that, like, I was really frustrated, right? I just wanted to get up to the line and eat. But there was this responsibility they felt we had as a family to go last. And to be served last and to do the serving. And I appreciate that, especially because I was raised in a Pentecostal denomination that greatness is actually something they talk a lot about. And on the flip side, I did my seminary training. I've ministered in both Quaker and Mennonite circles. And so I was thinking, maybe it was Keith earlier talking about worship music. And my husband and I sort of joke that in the Mennonite world these days, it's almost like you can't hear a single sermon about God's greatness. We've maybe kind of turned to the other side of that. So I guess I would just say that there are many resources from our Peace Church brothers and sisters that think quite a lot about the underside, the upside down kingdom, those who serve humility.
Just lost you there for a moment, or is it me?
Was that?
I think maybe
you want to just say that? Was that me? Was it just my connection that was just unstable there, or did everybody get that last sentence?
Just go ahead and say it.
Oh,
Yeah,
it was just,
I did for you, Paul. I can respond once again that our Anabaptist brothers and sisters have quite a lot to offer in theology, worship materials, theology. So there's something there that we could work with, I think.
No, I think I've been really challenged by, the use of non-violent military metaphors in ministry, and just when the idea was shared with me quite a while ago, I just realised how prevalent it was in my language and my metaphors.
I would say a great resource, pardon me, is anyone who wants to research Alan Kreider's writing. If you know him, he's since passed, but he was a professor at the Mennonite Seminary in Indiana. He has one called Patient Ferment of the Early Church. And I think it's a great resource that helps theologians and historians tap into what are our roots in the areas of patience, humility. And then he also writes one on worship and mission after Christendom. I think that's the title. And it's a very practical kind of resource that helps think through liturgy and mission in a post-Christendom era where we can't assume greatness. And it ties in as well to the early church. And he co-wrote it with his wife, who's a liturgist from Notre Dame, has been trained there. And he also spent quite a bit of time in the UK. And so he writes from both a UK and an American perspective, which I think could be helpful for many in our circles.
You're just being asked to put the name. Somebody's already done it. Look at that. Carolyn's already done it.
Carolyn was on it.
Look at that, eh? You speak and it should, oh, look at this. Great. No, thank you, guys. I really do appreciate you joining and sharing. And it's just really helpful for us to hear your perspective on that from that side of the pond. So I'm just mindful of time. Haddon, you got disturbed earlier on. You I don't know whether you were offered dinner or a drink or go and help with chores, but you've just muted yourself, Haddon. So if you'd like to come back and reflect on any of those things.
My wife was bringing me some money. Very nice to have. I just want to respond.
Sign of greatness, maybe.
No. I was just wanting to respond to the suggestion from Fuller, and I can't remember your name, I'm afraid, that some kind of statement should be made. And I would say, yes, I mean, I think that we Christians, and particularly those of us who spend a lot of our time on words and thinking and things, do need to be prepared to make statements and to make them publicly. I mean, in my own life, the story of the Barmen Declaration, I spent a lot of time on that. And I mean, it's the simple insistence that you may not be able to do very much, but at least you take a stand, and you know where you are, people know where you are, and it has the word makes its own presence in the situation. But I think if we do make a statement, we've got to be ready to stand to it. I mean, it is no good, like this very effective president that you have, of making big tariffs one day and then withdrawing them the next. If we make a statement, we've got to be prepared to follow it up, and it'll produce other arguments. And in the case of the Barmen Declaration, of course, it produced years of continuing argument and witness and suffering. I'm not suggesting that would happen in this case, but it does. But I do think that the initial thing, actually to take a position, to take it in public, that then brings us to the next stage, whether we'll carry on or not. But if you never start, you never have the chance to decide to carry on.
I think that's really helpful. Well, I think without wanting to speak on behalf of the board, that maybe the board needs to discuss it at our next meeting. I think it's a really wise challenge, and yeah, indeed. Thank you.
Dave Scott has his hand up, Paul, in case you can't see.
Great, thank you, Keith.
Just really briefly, I wanted to mention that the other unusual dynamic for the US, but it is very relevant to the Barmen Declaration, is that, of course, this time around with the Trump administration, there's been more effort put into trying to identify and squelch dissent. And so all of us are operating under a sense of very real risks and consequences of speaking out. So I think in that sense, being able to join an international statement would actually be quite beneficial for us. We are all having to make choices about how we are going to take a stand, what we're willing to risk to speak out against what the government is doing. And it's just, I had to acknowledge a couple months ago, we no longer live in a country that has free speech. And that is a different thing for Americans to try to get used to.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think would be really interested in partnering with any of the students, Dave, in initiating some of that. I think that would be very, very, very exciting. So,
just to say, David Cronick has his hand up as well, Paul.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say one living abroad for most of my adult life, I feel like I am always apologizing for America, and I'm all the more, I think, ashamed and really. I think we have to ask for repentance for not just what this is doing to the United States, but the impact it's having around the world. I think the other piece with this is it's disheartening to see all the evangelical churches, or a lot of evangelicals that are supportive of MAGA, but also just especially if we're thinking of composing a statement, a lot of them would say that they're doing this in the name of receiving the child. So the anti-abortion movement, rhetoric, legislation, all of that, there's a projection of means to end. And so if I can use this greatness for the sake of what I see is good for the child, so all of the problems around that, and then even I think within the greater failure of discipleship in the church. Last year in Romania, a person who grew up in the Pentecostal church, travels around leading worship. He said he doesn't understand why Paul said that he preaches Christ and him crucified. Why doesn't he preach Christ and him resurrected? And I thought this is just very revealing of our message, of our ethos, of our mode of discipleship, and our vision for what greatness, what discipleship looks like. So I think this conversation has broad implications for that.
Wow. Well, thank you, Dave. That's really, that just really does bring it home. Carolyn.
I'm just picking up on Lucy's comment about how did the child feel in the midst? Did they feel great? And the comment from Dave around competition, and just wondering if a future discussion around what children understand by competition, what children experience by competition, and how that relates to some of the bigger themes that we've been talking about, might be an interesting subject for us to explore. Because I think we do foster it in our Western cultures. We do foster competition. We encourage children to do sport, to win, not just to get fit, and all of that kind of stuff. And I just, it might be an interesting thing. But I also think an interesting thing in terms of whether it is a very Western culture thing, or whether there are other cultures where children are not nurtured in competition, and therefore we have something we can learn from that.
Yeah, we're always looking. Sally, is that a hand?
I was just responding to Carolyn. I was skim reading, admittedly, something earlier today from Bonnie Miller McLemore, talking about how play is distorted, and one of the things she discusses as play is being distorted partly through competitive sports and all those sorts of things. And I think it feeds into what you've just been saying, but is it called Embracing Chaos or something? It's quite an old book. It's nearly 20 years old, but she talks about she's writing on a Christian perspective of play, and how it's been very distorted by things like sport and competition. And it's I think it's a very interesting topic. The other thing I was going to say that's sort of quite tangential to a lot of what we've been saying is the comments on the death of Pope Francis have been fascinating to read in the light of someone who is a humble leader in in the sense the highest position in the Catholic Church, but appear to live in such a way as we've been talking about today.
What particularly with the comments, Sally, that people have warmed to that? Or
I personally haven't seen it, apart from he might have been able to do more in pushing things like the ordination of women. Virtually everything I have read about the death of Pope Francis has been, and it may just be that I read the wrong things, but has been very complimentary about him, affirming him as a religious leader, sometimes comparing him you know, as the sort of religious leader that, you know, is a very good example of a religious leader, and sort of seeing things written by people who I think are not necessarily people of faith and across different Christian traditions as well. I think I've rarely seen so many sort of positive things from such a wide range of people on someone's death.
Right. No, thank you. Great. I'm mindful of time. Haddon, is there anything you'd like to come back on, or anything that's come to mind and has prompted you out of what people have commented that you may have wanted to have said?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed the discussion, and I think it's caught a bit of fire, which I enjoy. I would only say that I do think that not all competition. I mean, I think a lot of competition in sport, particularly maybe non-professional sport, or has got the combative element, and it has got the element of cubs, you know, little young animals playing together to learn the skills of life. But that even when a competition is hard, it seems to me it also does build friendships and so on between those who play. I must take this phone call, I'm afraid.
No, that's fine, Haddon.
I've said enough. But
no, that's fine. Please, if you can come back before we finish, that will be great. Yeah, I don't know if we've been talking very profoundly, so it's about time we came back to a YouTube clip, isn't it? I don't know whether anybody has seen the wrestling clip of, it must be quite young children. It looks like it's in an American school or a club to me, where quite a profoundly disabled child is wrestling, and a very able child is put up against them, and the way in which the child engages with the disabled child in the wrestling. If you can find it, it's very, very profound. And the comment at the end of the video says, this was a child who was brought up properly, with real values, and it's particularly, I think it's very, very illustrative of what we've been talking about, of who is the greatest. Yeah, so it looked very, very genuine.
It just there's one thing just to respond at this point, if I could. There's an interesting question as to what a statement would look like. I mean, what form it should be? Should it be X, TikTok, Instagram? What form? No, video clip. Seriously, the Barmen Declaration was on Nicaea. They were of their time. But I just want to say, as a servant of the board of CTM, that I think we ought to make a statement to begin the process.
Yeah.
But what I'm very alert to is that with the Barmen Declaration, there was a very gifted person called Karl Barth, extraordinarily intelligent and well informed. And that's what we need to do, because this whole point about, I think it's from the other side of the pond, getting this news that in the name of receiving a child, MAGA is doing a lot. So the SPUK, how many have been saved? The death squad. So abortion, and then the protection of children from all sorts of evils.
Yeah.
And that's where we really, it's something where we've got to get the collegiate wisdom.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about woolly, but just we can't do this half-cock.
Indeed. No, and that was what we were trying to encourage when David came in, to bring not a juxtaposition, but there is another way of looking at
Yeah, sure.
looking after the well-being of children, which I think we should be mature and wise enough to bring in alternative and even opposing opinions to our own to understand that. So I think that's absolutely right. So, well, we've got 10 minutes. If anybody's got any wisdom of how we might pursue that, feel free. Just to, if there's anybody who joined after we did introductions, who'd like to share about anything that they're doing about child theology, then please do. But we want to just advertise James Gilbert will be sharing on a journey with child theology, the child in my midst, on the 30th of September, probably either 4 or 5 p.m. UK GMT. Our clocks won't have gone back by then, so it will be the same time zone that we're currently in, summertime. And Keith, would you like to do the announcement again with more people here for our first lecture?
Yep. To say that James will be the child in the midst, he's talking about, is in Brazil. I mean, so he's talking from South America. So this will be the first of our networks, which has been rooted in Latin or South America. So that's the significance. Just to say, two announcements. One is that we're very close to having 2 new books, which I really hope will be available by the time of the annual lecture. I'm just looking at Carolyn and Sally, thinking this isn't unrealistic, is it? Thank you so much.
No, they're being copy edited currently. So they're being professionally copy edited currently. Once that's done, it should be a fairly short process.
So these are 2 collections drawn from around the world from the last 25 years. One focusing on, if I can use crude terms, theology, and the other on practical issues of church and mission and so on with children. Is that a fair way of putting it, Sally?
I would probably just nuance it slightly to say one is more aimed at practitioners and one's more aimed at theologians, and there is some overlap between the two because some people's writing, I think, crosses both.
Sally, that's very gracious, and that's a way of saying no. You're not right, Keith. This is.
Well, no, it's very. I think it was. Yeah, I think we will have different lenses, and that's probably how I would describe it because of my background.
Yeah, that's good. So that's one announcement, Paul Nash, to say.
And Keith, as Sally's husband, I'd take that. So if that's your worst correction, I'd just take that and run. So
really, that's really good. Thank you so much, Paul. And I'll leave the 2 of you to discuss that afterwards, if I may. The other thing is just a reminder about the annual lecture. So as CTM has been post-COVID and trying to find new ways of doing things, a new role, and the use of these online networking groups is very significant. We did think that an annual lecture would be a good focal point each year. And so Professor Frances Young, the huge significance for those who don't know her, I mean, her specialism is patristics and early church. But it is that through her son Arthur, who, despite his profound challenges, disabilities, and her mothering and nursing, lived to be over 40, she came to a whole new awareness of life, her ministry, and so on. And so it comes, for me, there is something very enfleshed and real about what she's presenting, which connects deeply with child theology. So something about child theology is never that it's trying to say there's a boundary here, we're distinct from that sort of theology or that sort of theology. There is competition between this and that. It's something much deeper about, yeah. Anyway, when I have to say that during the High League consultation, which is nearly 10 years ago now, but I had the privilege of sitting in the round beside Francis during quite a lot of the time, and it was just so instructive. And I know that Haddon has found as well that her writing, her experience, is something that's important. So I want to say this, for me, is a joy that it's Francis giving the first annual lecture, and in good time. She was really saying, look, if you asked me a year or two later, I think I would have just said no, because I'm going to, tie up my boots or whatever, hang on my boots. So there we are. That's it. I hope I've done my best, Paul, on that.
Did you do the date? So 26th of November.
That's the one. Wednesday, the 26th of November.
Yeah.
And at the moment we're working on 4 p.m., 1600 hours. It's actually, I think, then Greenwich. Oh, definitely Greenwich Mean Time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apologies for those of you who this doesn't impact, but that's when we're on a residential trustees meeting. So is it going on longer, or have I got the wrong dates? Because normally we finish with lunch, and most of us would be travelling.
Right.
Or was that something for another time to look at? But
it was literally for the trustees to have done their business, have lunch, to do whatever they wanted to with their hair and makeup, and reappear at 4 o'clock. I think that was the idea anyway. So pleading with them to remain a little longer.
Great. All right. Well, so 2 very exciting things. We're always looking for new speakers. There was a semi-synergy between somebody being volunteered and being very happy to be volunteered in David. So David, if you and I could be in touch, I think this would be early next year now. So if, like Francis, you like plenty of notice, but not too much notice, we'll come back. But please, my brother, have a think. You've been around. Feel free to get something as personal and distinct to how you've been serving and discovered and been on the CT journey. So if we can do MAGA, we can do most topics. So so you're okay. The bar's been set pretty high of what we can manage, right? So we're okay. And the same goes to the Fuller guys. Thank you. Please, in the definition of greatness, please don't be too modest and not offer. So you've been given, when you're given full permission, it's not humility. So there should be a connection email. Thank you to all our tech support in Corinne. Corinne helps manage the website, and she will have this up very, very shortly on the website. I'm not going to put her on the spot of when that might be, but just to say thank you to her. 30th of September, 26th of November, lots of things to look forward to. And just our final thanks to Haddon for a stimulating but safe but provocative and enabling conversation about a very, very tricky subject. And I think for us to be able to really engage with this, of thinking about how we might do a statement around greatness, I think is a real important development for child theology movement. And again, in all modesty, people, please feel free to be in touch with any of the board if you'd like, if you feel prompted. to just start a draft, then please do. You're given, full permission. Nobody's going to misunderstand you. We're just going to appreciate your contribution to keeping the momentum going for that kind of response. So please do that. So anything else from the board that I've forgotten or we should have done?
Paul, I'm so sorry. I don't want to be speaking again because there's so much I'm listening to. I just want Dave and colleagues to know that I, for one, was hearing very deeply what was being said, which is there are times when we need solidarity and companionship, and others can take a lead. So I'm hearing that because at the moment it happens on this little place that sometimes is called Great Britain in Northern Ireland. Let's not forget. Sometimes we have a freedom, and with that goes a responsibility to say things. So I think that's been heard. I think another thing, having mentioned Paul, our African colleagues, this is where if we could draw from them on this statement, that would make that really is for those who've been on the other side of colonial ventures and so on. So we're on to something. I think we need to proceed very carefully, but I'm not. This isn't a way of saying let's put it into the long grass.
No,
to say that I think I can see we have the resources, but it's going to take some wisdom to get things together. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed. Well, in the spirit of joining in with that spirit of true greatness, shall we share that word of what is unique and wonderful? And I use the word unreservedly, which is great about our faith, and that is the grace that we live under in Jesus. And so shall we just say the grace together as we finish? May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.